The snarling mass of midnight fur and scarred muscle tore through the cobblestone courtyard, scattering the elite royal guard like brittle autumn leaves. This was no ordinary wolf. This was the Alpha King's war beast, a feral, unstoppable entity that hadn't yielded to anyone, not even its own master's logic, in a decade. Blood dripped from its massive, iron-crushing jaws as it locked its glowing, unnatural amber eyes on the fragile figure of a girl in a threadbare coat. Luna. She didn't run. She couldn't. As the beast lunged, a collective, horrified gasp sucked the air from the stronghold. The entire pack braced for the inevitable spray of crimson. Instead, the monstrous creature stopped inches from her frail body, lowered its massive head, and pressed its snout to the frozen mud at her worn boots. It knelt, and the pack went dead silent. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was a vacuum, a terrifying suspension of reality. The wind howling off the northern peaks seemed to mute itself, catching in the pines surrounding the Alpha King's stronghold. 300 wolves, the most lethal fighters on the continent, stood paralyzed in the snow. Luna stared down at the creature. It was the size of a warhorse, its fur matted with the blood of the rogues it had just slaughtered at the border. Heat radiated from its massive form in waves, melting the frost beneath its paws. Its heavy, ragged breaths plumed in the freezing air, brushing against Luna's bare, shivering knees through the tears in her thin denim jeans. She didn't know why she was here. She had only come to the Citadel's outer gates to deliver the poultices the castle healers had purchased from her ailing grandmother. When the warning bells rang and the rogue attack breached the outer ward, she had been trapped inside the courtyard. She was collateral damage, a nameless, scentless, poverty-stricken girl from the lower Slav. Yet the war beast, the legendary terror that kept the kingdom's enemies awake at night, was bowing to her. "Don't move," a voice hissed. It was Kale, the beta, his silver broadsword trembling in his grip just 10 yards away. He was addressing Luna, though his eyes were locked in terror on the beast. "Girl, do not breathe. Do not flinch." But Luna's hands, blue from the cold and trembling with a mixture of absolute terror and a bizarre, unexplainable sorrow, moved on their own. She looked into the beast's glowing amber eyes. There was a tempest of violence in them, but beneath the rage, she saw an agonizing, suffocating cage of pain. It was a creature pushed past the brink of endurance. Slowly, she uncurled her freezing fingers. "Stop!" Kale barked, taking a step forward. A guttural, earth-shaking snarl ripped from the beast's throat. It didn't rise, but its massive head snapped toward the beta, snapping its jaws with a force that echoed like a gunshot. Kale froze. The beast turned its attention back to Luna, letting out a soft, almost pathetic whine that no one in the pack had ever heard. Luna's palm rested gently against the coarse, blood-soaked fur between its ears. A jolt of electricity shot up her arm, straight to her chest. The beast closed its eyes, leaning its massive weight into her tiny hand. The collective shock of the pack was palpable. A few guards dropped to their knees, unsure if they were submitting to the beast or to the girl holding it tame. Then, the beast began to shudder. The violent tremors racked its massive frame, the sound of popping bones and shifting cartilage breaking the silence. Luna stumbled backward, clutching her chest as the air around them heated to an unbearable degree. The midnight fur receded, replaced by the pale, scarred skin of a man. Alpha King Cassian rose from the melting snow. He was breathtakingly terrifying. Tall, heavily muscled, and covered in the silver scars of 100 battles, he stood naked in the freezing wind, though the cold seemed to avoid him entirely. His chest heaved as he fought to regain control of his human mind, the golden ring of the beast still fading from his dark, stormy gray eyes. Cassian looked at his hands, slick with rogue blood, then slowly lifted his gaze to the girl huddled in the snow. His jaw tightened. He had been trapped in the war beast's mind for 3 days, a feral state he usually only survived by isolation in the silver-lined dungeons. He remembered nothing of the slaughter, only the scent, a scent like crushed winter berries and rain. Cassian took a slow, deliberate step toward her. Luna scrambled backward, her worn boots slipping on the ice until her back hit the stone wall of the keep. "Who?" Cassian's voice was a low, gravelly command that vibrated in the marrow of everyone present. "Are you?" I brought the herbs," Luna whispered, her teeth chattering so violently she could barely form the words. "For the healers?" Cassian stared at her. She possessed no wolf scent. She was human, or at least entirely suppressed. Yet his beast, a primordial entity of war and dominance, was purring in the back of his mind, demanding he wrap her in his own skin to keep her warm. He shrugged off Kale's offered cloak, stepping so close to Luna that she had to crane her neck to look at him. He reached out, his large, blood-stained thumb brushing a smear of dirt from her pale, terrified cheek. "Take her to the high tower," Cassian commanded without looking away from her wide, hazel eyes. "Guard the door. If a single hair on her head is harmed, I will execute the entire vanguard." The room at the top of the high tower was warmer than anywhere Luna had ever been in her 19 years of life. A massive hearth crackled with thick oak logs, casting a golden, flickering light over plush velvet armchairs and a sprawling 4-poster bed draped in furs. It was a room designed for royalty, for foreign dignitaries and honored mates. To Luna, it felt like a polished coffin. She stood in the center of the vast Persian rug, refusing to sit, refusing to remove her threadbare coat despite the stifling heat. Her grandmother was waiting for her back in their drafty, rotting cabin at the edge of the human settlements. If Luna didn't return with the silver coins for the herbs, they wouldn't eat this week. But escaping a stronghold guarded by 300 apex predators was an impossible dream. The heavy oak door unlatched with a metallic clack. Cassian stepped inside. He was dressed now, clad in dark, tailored trousers and a simple black linen shirt that clung to the heavy musculature of his chest and arms. He looked immaculate, composed, the absolute picture of a ruthless, calculating king. But as his gray eyes locked onto hers, Luna saw the briefest flash of gold in his irises. The beast was right there, scratching at the surface. "Sit," Cassian said, closing the door behind him. The lock clicked. "I prefer to stand, Your Majesty," Luna replied, her voice remarkably steady despite the frantic beating of her heart. Cassian paused, clearly unaccustomed to defiance. He walked over to a crystal decanter on a mahogany side table, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. He held one out to her. She shook her head. "It will stop you shivering," he said softly. "I'm not shivering from the cold anymore," she answered truthfully. Cassian set the glass down and crossed the room, stopping exactly 3 feet away from her. It was a calculated distance. Close enough to intimidate, far enough to maintain a boundary. He studied her. She was painfully thin, her cheeks hollowed by what he instantly recognized as long-term malnutrition. Her clothes were mended in dozens of places, the cheap wool offering no real protection against the territory's brutal winters. "What is your name?" he asked. "Luna." Cassian's jaw clenched. A bold name for a human living in shifter territory. "Who gave it to you?" "My mother, before she died." Luna lifted her chin, refusing to break eye contact. "I delivered my goods. The rogue attack had nothing to do with me. I hid in the courtyard like the guards told me to." I want to go home." "You aren't going anywhere," Cassian stated, his tone flat, leaving no room for negotiation. "Not until I understand what you did to me." "I didn't do anything." Luna's voice rose, a crack of desperation breaking her composed facade. Your wolf charged me. I thought I was going to die. I just put my hand out. That's it." Cassian closed the distance between them in a fraction of a second. Luna gasped as his large, calloused hands gripped her shoulders, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to paralyze. He leaned in, burying his face in the crook of her neck. Luna froze, terrified he was going to tear her throat out. Instead, she heard him take a long, deep breath, inhaling her scent. A deep, rumbling growl vibrated in his chest, vibrating against her own collarbone. "You smell like nothing," Cassian muttered, pulling back slightly, his eyes searching hers with frantic intensity. "No pack, no hierarchy, no wolf. You are completely, entirely human. So why does my beast want to rip the throat out of anyone who looks at you? Why did it force me to my knees?" "I don't know," Luna whispered, a tear finally escaping her eye and tracking through the dirt on her cheek. "Please, my grandmother is sick. She needs me." Cassian stared at the tear. Slowly, his thumb rose, catching the drop of moisture before it hit her jaw. The tenderness of the gesture was violently at odds with the lethal danger of the man performing it. "Your grandmother will be moved to the medical wing of the Citadel by nightfall," Cassian said quietly. "She will have the finest healers in the kingdom." Luna's breath hitched. "Why? What do you want from me?" "The truth," Cassian said, stepping back, the cold mask of the king sliding back over his features. "Because if you are a witch who cast a glamour on my wolf, I will have to burn you. But if you are what my beast insists you are, the elders will try to kill you themselves." The council chamber was carved from the living stone of the mountain, a circular room echoing with centuries of ruthless political maneuvering. Cassian sat at the head of the obsidian table, his posture relaxed, though the air around him crackled with a suffocating, oppressive dominance. The 7 elders of the realm were in a state of absolute uproar. "It is a disgrace." Elder Torin, a gray-haired wolf with a heavily scarred face, slammed his fist on the table. "The war beast, bowing to a filthy human rat from the slough? The surrounding territories will hear of this within the week. They will think you have gone soft, Cassian. They will think the king is compromised." "Let them think what they want," Cassian replied smoothly, tracing the rim of his crystal glass. "If they wish to test my softness, they are welcome to meet me at the border." "This isn't just about border politics," Elder Vane hissed, leaning forward. "This is about the succession. The beast knelt. It submitted. It claimed her as something of higher authority. If the pack believes this human holds power over the alpha, they will fracture. We cannot have a human queen. It violates every sacred law of the goddess." "No one said anything about a queen." Cassian's voice dropped an octave, a dangerous, gravelly warning. "Then dispose of her," Torin demanded. "Execute the girl. Prove to the pack that the beast was merely confused by a spell or a rogue scent. Show them that the Alpha King bows to no one." Cassian stopped tracing the glass. The silence that fell over the room was sudden and absolute. He slowly raised his eyes, fixing Torin with a stare so lethal the elder physically recoiled into his chair. "If any of you," Cassian said softly, the beast bleeding into his voice, making the stone walls vibrate slightly, "breathe a single word against her, or if you so much as look in the direction of the high tower, I will strip the flesh from your bones and feed it to the crows." The elders blanched, This wasn't the calculated political Cassian they had raised to power. This was the beast speaking. "Cassian, be reasonable," Elder Vane pleaded, his tone placating. "If she isn't a witch, what is she? Why did the wolf submit?" "I don't know yet," Cassian admitted, the admission tasting like ash in his mouth. "But until I find out, she remains under my protection. The girl's family will be brought into the keep. She is a guest of the crown. The pack will demand a proving." Torrance sneered, regaining a fraction of his courage. "If you claim she is worthy of your protection, she must prove her resilience. The winter solstice hunt is in 3 days. Bring her. Let the elements and the pack decide her worth." Cassian's mind raced. The winter solstice hunt was brutal. It was designed to test the endurance of the strongest warriors. For a malnourished human girl, it was a death sentence. But denying the proving would only confirm the elder's accusations that he was compromised, sparking a civil war within his own ranks. "Fine," Cassian said, standing up. He towered over the table, casting a long, dark shadow. "She will attend the hunt." He turned and strode out of the chamber, the heavy oak doors slamming shut behind him with a deafening crack. He walked briskly down the winding stone corridors, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. His beast was raging, clawing at his chest, screaming at him for agreeing to put the girl in danger. "Protect," the beast roared in his mind. "Mine. Protect." "Shut up," Cassian muttered to himself, clutching his head as a sharp spike of pain lanced through his skull. He needed to warn her. He needed to prepare her. When he reached the high tower, the 2 elite guards at the door bowed deeply, stepping aside. Cassian threw the door open, expecting to find Luna cowering by the fire or weeping on the bed. Instead, she was standing by the massive arched window, having pushed it open to the freezing winter night. The wind whipped her dark hair around her face. She held a small silver dagger, one she had clearly stolen from his desk, firmly in her hand, staring out at the precipitous drop to the rocks below. Cassian's blood ran cold. "Luna," he breathed, freezing in the doorway, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Step away from the ledge." She turned to him, her hazel eyes completely devoid of fear. There was only a cold, hard determination that belonged to a survivor who had finally run out of options. "My grandmother isn't in the medical wing," Luna said, her voice cutting through the wind like glass. "I saw the guards bring her cart into the courtyard. She's dead, Cassian. They killed her because of me, because of you." The wind howling through the open archway was a physical force, vicious and biting, threatening to pluck Luna's frail body from the stone ledge. Below her, a sheer 500-foot drop ended in a jagged maw of black granite, currently veiled in the swirling vortex of a blizzard. Cassian's heart didn't just stop. It seized. The beast beneath his skin roared, an agonizing, deafening sound in his mind that clawed at the walls of his skull. It demanded he lunge, snatch her from the ledge, and cage her beneath his own body. But Cassian, the military strategist, knew that any sudden movement would startle her. Her worn boots had no traction on the icy stone. One flinch and she would fall. "Luna," Cassian said, his voice dropping into a low, hypnotic register, devoid of command. It was a plea. "Look at me." They threw her like garbage onto a cart. Luna screamed, her voice cracking as the wind whipped her dark hair across her tear-streaked face. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the stolen silver dagger. I saw her hand hanging over the side. The skin was gray. She wasn't moving. "You lied to me." "I did not lie," Cassian replied, taking a slow microscopic shift forward. The muscles in his thighs locked, coiled like steel springs. She is in a magically induced stasis sleep. The cart you saw was the only way to transport her from the lower gate to the subterranean medical ward without the cold stopping her failing heart. She is alive, Luna. Luna sneered, the expression raw and broken. Why should I believe a monster? You rule by blood. You don't care about a dying human from the slough. Cassian stopped. He looked at the silver dagger in her hand. The metal gleamed with a toxic luminescence in the moonlight. Silver, lethal to his kind. Even a shallow cut from it burned like battery acid. A strike to the chest was an agonizing death. Without breaking eye contact, Cassian unbuttoned the cuffs of his black linen shirt. Slowly, methodically, he pulled the dark fabric over his head and tossed it to the plush rug. The firelight danced across his torso, illuminating a chaotic map of brutal, jagged silver scars. The history of a king who fought on the front lines, refusing to let his men die alone. Because? Cassian said, stepping completely out of the doorway and moving to stand only an arm's length from the precipice. If I am lying, you can drive that silver blade directly into my heart. I will give you my life for hers. I will not stop you. Luna stared at him, the wind momentarily forgotten. He stood bare-chested in the freezing gale, an apex predator exposing his throat to a starving rabbit. The golden ring flared in his stormy gray eyes, not with violence, but with a desperate, crushing vulnerability. You're crazy, Luna whispered, her arms shaking so violently the dagger wavered. You would let me kill you? I don't think I have a choice, Cassian murmured, the beast's raw honesty bleeding through his words. If you fall, I don't think my wolf will survive the grief. And a king without his mind is a dead king anyway. He didn't offer his hand. He simply stood there, waiting. The silence between them stretched, thick and suffocating despite the roaring blizzard. Luna looked down at the black abyss, then back at the towering, heavily scarred man offering his life for a grandmother he didn't even know. The sheer absurdity of it, the profound weight of his gaze, broke the fragile dam of her panic. With a ragged sob, Luna stepped off the ledge. Her legs gave out the moment her boots hit the rug. Cassian moved with a speed that defied physics. Before she could hit the floor, his arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his bare, burning chest. The silver dagger clattered harmlessly against the stone hearth. Luna buried her face into his shoulder, weeping uncontrollably, the adrenaline leaving her body in violent shudders. Cassian closed his eyes, burying his face in her dark hair, inhaling the scent of winter berries and rain. His massive hand cradled the back of her head. Safe. His beast purred in the back of his mind. Safe. Come with me, he whispered gently, lifting her effortlessly into his arms as if she weighed no more than a shadow. I will show you. He carried her down 40 flights of spiraling stone stairs, ignoring the shocked gasps of the night guard. Deep beneath the keep, in a room glowing with warm, bioluminescent moss and humming with ancient magic, Luna saw her grandmother. The old woman was resting in a crystal-paneled bed, her chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. A soft pink hue returned to her previously gray cheeks. Luna pressed her hand against the warm glass, her tears flowing silently now. Cassian stood a respectful distance behind her, watching the tense line of her shoulders finally soften. I'm sorry, Luna whispered into the quiet hum of the room, not turning around. I stole your dagger. I threatened you. You protected your pack, Cassian replied, his voice a low rumble in the cavern. I respect nothing more. But your grandmother's survival is no longer our most pressing concern, Luna. Yours is. Luna finally turned, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her oversized coat. "What do you mean?" Cassian's expression hardened, the gentle protector vanishing, replaced by the grim tactician. "The Council of Elders demands a proving. In 3 days, you will run in the winter solstice hunt." The armory of the Alpha King was a cavernous hall of polished steel, dark leather, and the heavy scent of gun oil and iron. The morning sun barely pierced the narrow, slit windows, casting long, sharp shadows across the racks of weaponry. Luna stood on a small wooden dais, her arms raised rigidly to the sides, while Cassian meticulously fastened a boiled leather chest piece over her thick woolen tunic. The leather had been scavenged from a young squire's armor. It was the only thing small enough to fit her. Yet it still hung slightly loose on her malnourished frame. "The rules of the solstice hunt are simple but absolute," Cassian explained, his large fingers moving with surprising dexterity as he threaded the heavy iron buckles. 300 wolves enter the Whispering Woods at midnight. The goal is traditionally to hunt the great white stags that migrate through the valley. It is a test of tracking, endurance, and dominance. "And what is my goal?" Luna asked, staring straight ahead at a rack of broadswords, her voice tightly controlled. "To see the sunrise," Cassian said flatly. He pulled a strap tight, and Luna winced, though she didn't complain. Cassian immediately loosened it a fraction. His knuckles brushed against her collarbone as he adjusted the fit, and once again, that bizarre, static electric shock snapped between them. Cassian's breath hitched, his gray eyes darkening as he paused, his hands resting on her shoulders. Luna looked up at him. "Why do the elders want me dead so badly? I'm just a human. I hold no power." "You hold power over me," Cassian murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips before snapping back to her eyes. "Wolves are creatures of hierarchy. My beast is the apex. It bows to nothing. The fact that it knelt to you suggests to the pack that you are my superior. A human holding the leash of the Alpha King is a political nightmare. Elder Torin believes you are a witch who cast a glamour. If you die in the hunt, the spell is broken and order is restored. And if I survive, then the pack cannot deny your strength, human or not." Cassian stepped back, grabbing a pair of thick, fur-lined hunting boots. He knelt before her, motioning for her foot. Luna hesitated, shocked by the gesture, but slowly extended her leg. "Can I hide? Just climb a tree and wait until dawn?" "No," Cassian said, slipping the heavy boot onto her foot and lacing it tight. "Werewolves hunt by scent. You smell of fear and humanity. They will track you within 20 minutes, and Torin will ensure that his loyalists are hunting you, not the stags." "Then teach me how to kill them," Luna demanded, her hazel eyes hardening with a desperate survivor's grit that Cassian found terrifyingly beautiful. Cassian paused, looking up at her from his kneeling position. A sad, grim smile touched his lips. "Luna, my strongest warriors can shatter a boulder with a single strike. You weigh 90 pounds soaking wet. You cannot kill them. You do not fight a hurricane. You weather it. You are going to outsmart them." For the next 2 days, the high tower became a classroom of survival. Cassian didn't teach her how to swing a sword. He taught her the physiology of a werewolf. He showed her the blind spots in their peripheral vision when they were fully shifted. He taught her how they tracked, not just by scent on the ground, but by the airborne particles disturbed by running. "If you run in a straight line, you are dead," Cassian ordered, pacing the Persian rug as Luna practiced moving silently across the room. "You zigzag. You double back. You walk through freezing water to kill your scent trail. You rub pine ash and crushed wolfsbane on your pulse points. It will burn your skin, but it will blind their noses. On the final night before the hunt, Luna sat on the edge of the massive bed, applying a foul-smelling black paste to her neck and wrists. It stung like hell, turning her pale skin a raw, angry red. Cassian sat in an armchair nearby, watching her, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. The silence between them was heavy, laden with the unspoken reality that this might be her last night alive. "Cassian?" Luna asked softly, her fingers pausing on her wrist. It was the first time she'd used his name without a title. "Why hasn't your wolf tried to hurt me? Even when I threatened you, even when I smell human. Why me?" Cassian looked down at the amber liquid in his glass. For centuries, wolf lore spoke of fated mates, two halves of a single soul. But the goddess had seemingly abandoned them. A true mate hadn't been found in over 300 years. Shifters married for politics or breeding now. But when he looked at Luna, the gaping, bleeding hole of loneliness in his chest, a pain he had carried his entire life, simply ceased to exist. "I don't know." Cassian lied quietly, "but I know that if you die tomorrow, I will burn this entire kingdom to the ground." Luna stared at him, the weight of his words settling heavily on her small shoulders. She didn't feel like a queen, or a witch, or a mate. She just felt like a girl standing in the path of an avalanche. The morning of the winter solstice dawned the color of a bruised plum. The sky was heavy, threatening snow, and the temperature had plummeted to a bone-cracking 20 below zero. The central courtyard of the stronghold was packed with 300 elite warriors. The air was thick with the scent of adrenaline, musk, and the metallic tang of anticipated violence. The men and women were stripped down to lightweight leathers, their bodies practically vibrating with the urge to shift. At the raised stone dais overlooking the courtyard stood the 7 elders, draped in heavy ceremonial furs. Elder Torin's face was twisted in a smirk of profound satisfaction. Luna stood at the bottom of the dais, wrapped in dark, heavy furs, her face smeared with the black pine ash Cassian had made for her. She was shivering, not from the cold, but from the sheer, suffocating terror of being surrounded by apex predators who wanted her dead. Cassian strode out from the keep, and a hushed silence fell over the pack. He wore no armor, only a dark leather hunting tunic and his silver broadsword strapped to his back. His face was a mask of cold, unyielding stone. By tradition, the Alpha King had to mark the participants, blessing them for the hunt. Cassian moved through the front ranks, nodding to his generals. When he reached Luna, the entire courtyard seemed to hold its breath. Cassian stopped in front of her. His massive frame blocked the wind. He brought his thumb to his own mouth and bit down hard enough to draw blood. He reached out, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly, and smeared a streak of his dark, crimson blood across her forehead. "The Alpha's mark." Cassian spoke loudly, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "She runs under the protection of the crown. If any wolf intentionally strikes a lethal blow against her, it is treason." A murmur rippled through the pack. Elder Torin stepped forward to the edge of the dais. "Accidents happen in the dark, Alpha," Torin said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "The woods are treacherous. We cannot punish a wolf for the feral instincts of the beast." Cassian's jaw locked. He leaned down, pressing his forehead against Luna's, a shockingly intimate gesture that made the beta, Kale, avert his eyes. "Listen to me," Cassian whispered, for her ears alone. "I have to lead the vanguard to the northern ridge. It is the law, but I will break off the moment we shift. Head for the weeping willow by the frozen creek. Hide in the root system. Do not move. I will find you." Luna swallowed hard, nodding once, A massive war horn blew from the watchtower, a low, terrifying drone that shook the ground. Instantly, the courtyard erupted into chaos. 300 warriors dropped to their hands and knees, the sound of bones breaking and reforming, creating a sickening, cacophonous roar. Within seconds, a sea of massive, snarling wolves, coats ranging from snowy white to pitch black, replaced the human army. "Run!" Cassian roared over the din, before he too dropped to his knees, his midnight fur bursting from his skin. Luna didn't wait. She bolted. She sprinted through the open gates and plunged into the tree line of the Whispering Woods. The snow was deep, dragging at her boots, her lungs burning with the freezing air. Behind her, the howling began. It wasn't the majestic sound of nature. It was a blood-curdling chorus of a hunting party locking onto a scent. She remembered Cassian's training. She didn't run straight. She veered sharply to the left, diving through a patch of dense, thorny brambles that tore at her clothes, hoping it would deter the larger wolves. She rubbed her ash-covered wrists against the tree trunks, trying to confuse her trail. After 20 minutes of agonizing running, the silence of the woods descended. It was a terrifying, unnatural quiet. The howling had stopped. Luna leaned against a massive oak, gasping for air, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked around. The shadows were lengthening as the sun dipped behind the mountains. The woods were a labyrinth of gray bark and white snow. Crack! A twig snapped to her right. Luna froze. She slowly pulled the small hunting knife Cassian had given her from her belt. It wasn't silver, just steel, but it was all she had. From the shadows of the pines, a massive gray wolf emerged. It was twice the size of a normal timber wolf. Its yellow eyes locked onto her with terrifying intelligence. It wasn't Cassian. It didn't have the alpha's midnight fur. The wolf lowered its head, letting out a low, vibrating growl, baring teeth the size of railroad spikes. It took a slow step forward. Luna backed away, her boot hitting a slick patch of ice. She slipped, falling hard onto her back. The breath was knocked from her lungs. The gray wolf didn't hesitate. It lunged, its massive jaws opening to snap her neck. The gray wolf lunged, a blur of muscle and lethal intent. Luna squeezed her eyes shut, instinctively raising the flimsy steel hunting knife in a futile block. The impact never came. Instead, a concussive force, like a freight train colliding with a mountain, shook the frozen earth beneath her. Luna's eyes flew open. A massive, midnight black shape had intercepted the gray wolf midair. The Alpha King's war beast hit the attacker with such catastrophic velocity that both massive animals smashed through the trunk of a dead pine, sending a shower of splinters and snow into the air. The gray wolf yelped, a high-pitched sound of pure terror, as Cassian's beast pinned it to the forest floor. The war beast didn't just dominate. It radiated a primordial, suffocating fury. Its glowing amber eyes burned through the dark as its jaws clamped shut around the gray wolf's throat. Not tight enough to kill, but tight enough to draw blood and demand absolute submission. The gray wolf whined, its tail tucked tightly between its legs, its body going completely limp in surrender. Cassian's beast released the throat, letting out a roar that echoed off the mountain peaks, a sound so terrifying it sent a flock of ravens scattering into the night sky. The gray wolf scrambled backward, scrambling for traction on the ice, and fled back into the shadows of the tree line. Luna sat up, her breath coming in jagged, freezing gasps. Her hands shook so violently, she dropped the steel knife. The war beast turned toward her. The feral rage radiating from its massive frame was palpable, a violent storm of instinct. It took a heavy step toward her, the snow crunching beneath its paws. Luna's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't crawl backward. She remembered the courtyard. She remembered the man beneath the monster. "Cassian," she whispered, her voice barely carrying over the wind. The beast stopped. The violent tremor racked its body once more, the sickening sound of shifting bone filling the clearing. Within seconds, Cassian knelt in the snow, his human form pale and heaving for air in the freezing night. He was naked, his chest marked with fresh, bleeding scratches from the gray wolf's claws. But it wasn't just blood. Luna's eyes widened as she saw a sickly, luminescent silver dust sparkling within the deep gouges on his shoulder. "Silver," Cassian choked out, his voice a ragged rasp as he clutched his shoulder, his knees buckling. "They laced their claws with silver powder. It's treason." Luna scrambled to her feet, abandoning her fear. She rushed to his side, throwing her heavy, fur-lined coat off her own shoulders and frantically wrapping it around his shivering, massive frame. The coat barely covered him, but it was something. Torin set a trap, Luna realized, the political maneuvering finally making horrifying sense. He didn't just want me dead. He used me as bait to get you away from the Vanguard. He wanted to kill the Alpha. Cassian gritted his teeth, a low, animalistic growl vibrating in his chest as the silver burned into his bloodstream. "We need to move. The scent of my blood. The silver will weaken my beast. Torin's loyalists will smell it. They will come for both of us." "The Weeping Willow," Luna said, her voice firming with a sudden, fierce resolve. She grabbed his uninjured arm, pulling with all her meager weight. "You told me to go to the frozen creek. Come on, I won't let you die out here." Cassian looked at her, the golden ring in his gray eyes pulsing weakly. The Alpha King, a man who had carried the weight of a kingdom alone for a decade, leaned on the frail shoulder of a girl from the sloughs. Together, they limped into the dark. The hollowed-out root system of the ancient Weeping Willow was a natural, earthen bunker hidden beneath the overhang of the frozen creek. It was suffocatingly dark and smelled of damp earth and decay, but it was shielded from the biting wind. Cassian collapsed against the dirt wall the moment they slid inside. His breathing was shallow and rapid, his skin burning with a violent, unnatural fever. The silver was acting like a neurotoxin, paralyzing his shifter healing abilities. Luna didn't panic. Panic was a luxury the poor couldn't afford. In the pitch black, she felt around the roots, gathering handfuls of dry moss and dead leaves. She pulled a flint striker from her pocket, another item she had smartly pilfered from the armory, and struck it against her steel knife. Sparks showered, catching the moss. A tiny, fragile flame flickered to life, casting dancing shadows across the cramped space. She turned to Cassian. He looked terrible. The veins around the claw marks on his shoulder had turned a stark, poisoned black. "I have to get the silver out," Luna said softly, moving to kneel beside him. "It's going to hurt." Cassian forced a weak, grim smile. "I've endured worse, little human." Luna reached into her woolen tunic, retrieving a small, crushed leather pouch. It was the poultice she had originally come to the castle to deliver, the very reason she had been caught in the courtyard days ago. It was a potent mixture of crushed charcoal, yarrow, and river mud, designed by her grandmother to draw out deep infections. She used melted snow to clean the wounds, ignoring Cassian's sharp, involuntary hiss of pain. She packed the dark paste deeply into the lacerations, binding it tightly with strips torn from the hem of her own shirt. For a long time, the only sound in the cave was the crackle of the tiny fire and Cassian's ragged breathing. Slowly, the black veins began to recede. The charcoal was drawing out the silver dust. Cassian opened his eyes. The fever was breaking. He looked at Luna, who was huddled near the fire, her arms wrapped around her knees, shivering in just her thin tunic having given him her coat. He reached out with his good arm, gently catching her wrist and pulling her against his side. He wrapped the heavy fur coat around both of them, his massive body radiating a renewed, comforting heat. Luna didn't resist. She rested her head against his uninjured chest, listening to the steady, thumping rhythm of his heart. "Why did your beast bow to me?" Luna asked, the quiet intimacy of the cave stripping away the titles and the fear. "Tell me the truth, Cassian. I know I'm not a witch. I'm just nobody." Cassian rested his chin on the top of her head, his fingers gently tangling in her dark hair. "You aren't nobody," he murmured, his voice a deep, resonant hum in the dark. "My beast is a creature of war. It only knows violence, dominance, and cold survival. For 10 years I've been drowning in it. It was tearing my mind apart. But when it lunged at you in the courtyard, it didn't smell fear. It didn't smell a challenge." He paused, his chest rising and falling in a deep sigh. "It smelled peace," Cassian confessed softly. "It looked into your eyes and saw the one thing it couldn't conquer, because it didn't need to. It saw an anchor. Wolf lore speaks of mates, but the truth is older than that. My soul was fracturing, Luna. You didn't use magic. Your spirit simply commanded mine to rest. And it obeyed." Luna closed her eyes, a profound, aching warmth blooming in her chest, entirely separate from the fire. She wasn't a pawn. She wasn't a piece of collateral damage. She was the calm to a king's storm. "When the sun rises," Cassian said, his voice hardening into the uncompromising tone of the alpha, "I am going to tear Torin apart. And then, I'm going to ask you to stay. Not as my prisoner, as my equal." Luna looked up at him in the dim firelight, her hazel eyes reflecting the flames. "Then we better make sure we see the sunrise." The sky above the whispering woods bled from bruised purple into a brilliant, crystalline gold. The winter solstice hunt was over. At the edge of the tree line, the 300 wolves of the vanguard had shifted back to their human forms, donning heavy cloaks in the freezing dawn. They stood in a massive half-circle around the clearing. At the center stood Elder Torin, a smug, victorious smile playing on his lips. Beta Kale stood to the side, his face pale and drawn, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword. "The Alpha King has not returned," Torin announced, his voice carrying clearly in the crisp morning air. "And the human girl's scent is lost. It is a tragedy. The woods are unforgiving. But the crown must endure. As the eldest of the council, I will assume temporary." A low, guttural snarl cut through the air, freezing the blood of every shifter present. The heavy pine branches at the edge of the clearing snapped and parted. The pack gasped, stumbling backward. Out of the shadows stepped the war beast. It was massive, terrifying, and completely lethal. A crude bandage of torn cloth was wrapped around its right shoulder, but it didn't limp. It radiated a dominating, violent aura that forced several of the younger wolves to their knees in immediate submission. But it was what walked beside the beast that stopped the pack's collective heart. Luna stepped into the golden dawn light. She was covered in dirt, ash, and dried blood, her clothes torn and ragged. But she did not walk like a frightened human from the sloughs. Her head was held high, her spine perfectly straight. Her small, pale hand was twisted deeply into the thick, midnight fur at the nape of the war beast's neck. They moved in perfect, synchronized harmony. Torin's face drained of all color. "Treason!" he shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Luna. "She bewitched him! Kill the girl!" Not a single warrior moved. Beta Kael drew his sword, but he pointed it directly at Torin's chest, his eyes locked in awe on Luna and the Alpha. The war beast let out a deafening roar, stepping in front of Luna, preparing to slaughter the elder. But Luna gently tugged on the beast's mane. Surprisingly, the monstrous wolf instantly ceased its snarl, yielding to her touch, and sat back on its haunches. Before Torin could utter another word, a new sound echoed from the woods. A soft, rhythmic crunch of snow. From the exact path Luna and Cassian had just taken, an animal emerged. It was breathtaking. A great white stag, standing 7 feet tall at the shoulder, its coat shimmering like crushed diamonds, its massive antlers scraping the high branches. The sacred symbol of the goddess, the ultimate prize of the solstice hunt, which hadn't been seen in the valley for a century. The pack held its breath. The stag walked slowly past the stunned warriors. It walked past Elder Torin, not even acknowledging his existence. It approached the center of the clearing. The massive stag stopped directly in front of Luna. Slowly, gracefully, the magnificent creature bent its front knees and bowed its great, antlered head, pressing its velvet snout to the snow at Luna's boots. A collective gasp swept through the 300 warriors. The goddess had spoken. The earth itself recognized her authority. She was no witch. She was the chosen anchor of the king. Torin collapsed to his knees, knowing his life was forfeit. The war beast shuddered, its bones snapping as the midnight fur receded. Cassian stood before his pack, the morning sun catching the silver scars on his chest. He didn't look at his warriors. He didn't look at the traitorous elder. He looked only at Luna. Slowly, the Alpha King dropped to one knee before the girl from the Slavs, taking her dirt-stained hand and pressing his lips to her knuckles. Seeing their king yield, the Beta, the generals, and the 300 lethal warriors of the realm followed suit. The metallic clatter of weapons hitting the ground echoed through the valley as the entire pack dropped to their knees, bowing their heads to the snow. And once again, the pack went dead silent. Only this time, it wasn't out of horror. It was out of absolute reverence for their new queen. The silence of the pack wasn't just a submission to their king. It was the ultimate surrender to the unexpected, unbreakable bond between a fierce war beast and the gentle, unyielding spirit of a girl who refused to break. Luna and Cassian's journey proves that true power doesn't come from a bloodline or brute force, but from the courage to face the abyss and find peace within the storm. If you were captivated by Luna and Cassian's cinematic, high-stakes journey of survival, loyalty, and fierce romance,